Welcome everyone to I think it's the fourth, is it the fourth week of Lent? It is. So I think this is also our fourth guest for our Living Lent series, practicing kindness, compassion, and care. And I feel like the theme for this Lenten season, and in particular for this series, and what drove us into Lent was Isaiah 58. And so I have just started out every one of our times together reading Isaiah 58. Again, if you can mute if you are not talking, that will be helpful for our sound quality. So Isaiah 58, listen to what the prophet says. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like the noonday. And I think we were really convicted by the scripture. And as we were also thinking about who do we be in conversation with, who do we listen to, who do we look to, who is trying to live out Isaiah 58 and trying to follow Jesus in this time, your name just kept coming up. And so we are really excited to have the Reverend Lisa Anderson with us. She is the pastor of Colonial Cumberland Presbyterian Church, and she's also the founder and executive director of Room in the Inn Memphis. The way that you practice hospitality, both you and Barry, it has been incredible. And you practice and offer hospitality to strangers, to folks on the street, and you also offered it to me, and I'm incredibly grateful. And so I'm just really excited for this conversation. So my first question is really the question that I stole from Krista Tippett, and that's just tell us about if there was a spiritual or religious background to your, and I know a lot of us know the answer to this question, but I think hearing it from you and how you think it may have formed or shaped your life, we would love to hear more about.
It's always fun to me to have that question asked, because a lot of different people ask it when you're speaking places, and how I've answered that differently at different places in my life has been interesting to me. You know, there is a theme, of course, of growing up in a clergy home, and people assume, oh, well, it's in your DNA. And I think for a while, I wanted that maybe not to be true, that it be all about me when I was younger, and people would ask me that question, and wanting to find my own way. But reality is, now that I look back on a lot of years of life, the reality is that is in my DNA. It came from the people who I learned to be a servant from, even when I didn't want to be learning from them. And it was almost impossible to not have some sort of infusion, I guess, in me. And I see it in all of my siblings also, that something about watching our parents bring strangers into our home because they needed something, or watching my parents feed people because they were hungry, or make sure they had shelter when they were struggling with their kids. And, I think it's impossible for that not to become part of who you are, even if you struggle to find your own identity in it. And now it's fun to embrace that and say, well, of course, that's where it came from. Watching them be the kind of servants that they were in our home and in the church, so that's where it all started, but finding my individuality in that has also been interesting.
So I know there are some people on the call who aren't, or who are in this gathering who are not Cumberland Presbyterian, may not know what that is. There are others who do, but and who have also grown up in it, like you. But talk a little bit about you grew up in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church and what that was like, and even just your faith journey, not just necessarily your vocational journey, but like, were there times when you questioned your faith or walked away from either your faith or from the Cumberland Presbyterian Church?
I think I want to be more rebellious than I am. So I wish I had a story like that. There are a lot of times I've always wished, I wish I had a story that I ran away and did horrible things for a while and then realized that that's not who I was. But that's not true. I didn't do that. But I think there is a struggle, a faith struggle, no matter what your journey is. My dad was a pastor and felt his call to ministry best lived in smaller congregations. He was a vocational pastor most of my life, to feed all of us and still be faithful to the congregations he served. And so I think watching that struggle sometimes was hard for me, to see the sacrifices and just the struggles, the pain, and what we all know of as community life in congregations, that you hurt for each other and you are joyful for each other, but pastors feel that in a different way because it is more intense and more personal sometimes and more confidential, and sometimes, and you see it in ways that other people don't. And so I think there was a period of time where I thought, I'm not sure this is what I would want my life to look like. And so I can remember thinking that as growing up, well, this is not what I'll do. But it was also still this incredible learning experience of, that's not exactly who I am, but it is a model of ministry that I grabbed hold of, I think.
And talk a little bit about Room in the Inn for those. I know a lot of folks who are watching right now have experienced Room in the Inn, but there are certainly a handful of folks who don't know what it is and have never heard of it before. So.
Well, it's been a huge surprise in my life. Room in the Inn is a network of congregations that work together to do emergency shelter for people who are experiencing homelessness in Memphis and the surrounding area. And right at 10 years ago, there were a lot of ministry changes happening at Colonial, and trying to figure out some niches that we could feeling a real call to more justice kinds of ministries, and things that were going to engage the congregation with the world. And so small group of people, seminary students and other folks, people from different churches. Claire Little was right there at the beginning of Room in the Inn with all of us. And Colonial said yes to a difficult question when we asked, do you think that we could do something radical like let homeless people sleep in our building? And there was no hesitation about that. Just, yes, we could do that. It's empty, and why wouldn't we do that? It was almost like, well, nobody ever asked us before. That's a great idea. And so that was 10 years ago, and the congregation embraced that, grew from that. We were changed in ways that we didn't expect, personally and as a community. And then as things that are wonderful and from God tend to do, it became contagious. And so people who heard what we were doing wanted to help with that and started coming to serve dinners and help with hospitality. And they began to say, well, our church is empty too. And we could do this. And so it really kind of grew organically in a local congregation, finding ways to serve other people. And then watching that grow has been, I think it's been surprising for the congregation. It has been certainly surprising for me to just be dragged along on this wonderful journey. But, 59 groups of people who were sheltering homeless people later, to say, wow, we're glad we said yes, because it makes a difference in a lot of people's lives. So that's what we do.
Maybe it's a good time to ask, what's your favorite Room in the Inn story?
Oh. Well, there's some, there's some I can't tell. But I think, my favorites will always be, I think, stories that involve people who are incredibly vulnerable, but also open. And, this is not because you're on this call, Claire, but this is one of my very favorite stories of my experience with Room in the Inn. We do this year, all winter. And so Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, always is somebody's hosting Room in the Inn. And so Claire happened to be an overnight person on Christmas Eve one year. And we had the church was decorated and the Christmas tree was up and the lights were on and the lights were left on overnight. And Claire shared the story the next day with me that she got up early to start the coffee, and it was still dark outside. And one of the women had gotten up to and was just sitting by the Christmas tree. And Claire thought something was wrong. Are you okay? Do you need something? And she said she just got up early so that she could spend more time with the Christmas tree, to enjoy the Christmas tree, because she knew that that part of Christmas was about to be over for her after that night. So that picture, I can't ever get out of my mind, that the sanctuary that was offered her was more than a place to sleep and something to eat. It really brought the Christmas message to her in a way that she didn't have a chance to get very often. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. This is kind of a strange question because you're a minister and because you're a pastor, because you are executive director of an incredible ministry. But the question is kind of like, still in the midst of all that there's a lot of logistics in that and administration of that. But how do you live out your faith daily? And are there ways that applies to all of us, whether we're ordained or not, whether we're, able to commit, if we're paid to commit 8 hours a day to a particular work of justice or mercy in the world? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, sort of does. And you can let me know if I didn't get exactly what you want to talk about. But I think it is a struggle, and for me sometimes mentioning the administrative part of it, the logistics and all of that, it is a struggle to keep focused on. I think that we do a good job of it and we are intentional about it, but goodness, it's a lot of moving parts. And just this week, we are not sheltering people in our traditional way right now, but just the daily change in the people's lives who don't have shelter, and it's almost now down to the hour how things change for them. You know, you can be here now, but now you can't be here. You can go here now, but now you can't go here. We'll have this for you here, but we won't have that here tomorrow. And so it's just like on an almost hourly basis, the logistics change. And I've been struck today with how I can get lost in that. You know, I can spend too much of my time being angry about what is not happening and what people aren't doing, and not enough time really really embracing the fact that we sometimes it really is just seeing people and expressing that you care about them, and you know, hearing them say, "We're glad that you're here." I have had an upper respiratory infection that has sidelined me, and it's been so difficult not to see people face to face. And Barry went to do burrito ministry today and to share food with people who are downtown who literally there's nowhere for them to go. And, you know, just knowing that he was headed there and that there was a group of people who were going to see them face to face. You know, I think that's what we have to keep sight of. You know, that the ministry happens the distance between us, the different distance between two people. And if we're not experiencing that space between us, that's when I get lost. And it happens a lot.
Do you have any routines or practices to try to make sure that you're continuing to be in front of people, to make sure that you continue to do the work, to do ministry, and not to get caught up in the other things?
This week in particular has reminded me about my personality in ways that I don't really care to think about a lot of times. And the last couple of weeks of not being able to be with people, I'm a doer. I'm most comfortable expressing my faith in what I'm doing, and it's although my heart wants to be sit and contemplate things. My heart wants to be the person that's sitting and meditating and spending lots of time and that spiritual reflection, and I do a lot of that. I think probably more than any other time in my life, but I also realize at times like this, when I have more time to put into those kinds of reflective practices, that I really want to be expressing my faith the other way, and I get frustrated about that. And so it's really nice to have this time. I think however frustrating it is, it has been nice to cause me to look at my practices and realize that I was out of balance. You know, we were at the end of our winter season, and we were tired already, and things got really crazy really fast, and to suddenly stop, and have everything stop. And by everything, I mean like 80% of the stuff stop. There's still a lot going on, but the face-to-face, hands-on stuff just suddenly stopped. That I was a little out of balance, and having this past week especially to kind of find those rhythms again has been very helpful to me. So I know where I get my energy from, and it's in being with people and doing that. And so really pulling back and saying it's okay for me to focus on being healthy in every way, not just physically, but spiritually too, is what I need to do to get back out in the game, I guess.
thinking about ourselves as whole beings and our encounters with God in that way as well. Do you have a time where you've most felt the presence of God, or where you have seen the face of God, or the inbreaking of the kingdom, whatever you want to, any of those ways that you want to describe it? But do you have one that's particularly vivid to you?
There are several times in life, and I think I had, when I thought about that question, I think about it's kind of like the other question. I think about personal spiritual experiences that I've had where I was at a place or in an experience that I felt a strong spiritual connection with God, where God spoke to me in a particular way, and certainly that happens to me, in nature, or it happens to me in worship sometimes in unique ways. Happens to me sometimes in meditation. But as far as seeing God in other people, I spent most of my ministry life after seminary as a hospital chaplain. And I think that more often than I ever expected, finding Christ in suffering became real to me, that was where I saw Christ, and that I saw Christ in the faces of people who were suffering. And my first experience of that was early as a chaplain, when I was working at St. Joseph Hospital, which was a Catholic hospital in the city. And there was a children's psychiatric unit in that hospital that I did a spirituality group for, which was very interesting because there were kids that were very young or in mixed ages. And I did two groups. I did one for elementary school children that started at kindergarten, and then I did another group for teenagers. And in the teenage group, one time, there was a young man in the group who had just major anger issues, and I shared the leadership of the group with the social worker, and we were talking about his anger in that group and trying to get him to express it. And then all of a sudden, he just kind of started expressing a sorrow that was just so deep inside of him for other people in his life. And, this deep pain that he had, that was not his own pain. It wasn't pain. He certainly had many reasons to express his anger and sorrow at his own pain. The things that had happened to him in his life were unbelievable. But what I saw that day was his incredible pain and sorrow for the other people that he loved in his life. And I remember sitting in my office after that thinking, that's what I've always heard and been taught Jesus feels like to us, about us, about humanity, about creation. So I guess that's the one that came to mind when you asked me to think about that question, because it was the most powerful early experience of chaplaincy for me to look for that, because it was so vivid for me.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, so folks, if you guys have questions, I would ask that you begin to put those in the chat box or begin kind of forming those, and I'll ask if there are questions in a few minutes. But it feels like, and you alluded to it a little bit already, but it feels like we can't have a conversation during this time with also without asking how you are and how you're doing. Yeah.
This is a lot. I mean, I don't know of anyone that wouldn't express that this is a lot. This is these are the things of our short story readings and TV shows and movies that we've all, just imagined that, well, that would be terrible, but can't even imagine that really happening. And it really is happening. And it's happened to us in such a rapid, I think because we are so secure that it snuck up on us, because you imagine that it can't happen. So it is, I noticed, well, I've already had 3 weeks of being quarantined. So I'm about done already. But I have noticed that, the tiredness, even when you try to keep yourself doing things that are physical, and, it's just a tiredness that I think is not just it's not even personal. It's almost like you're carrying this weight that you don't know. And I was talking to another friend today, and just sharing that it is a collective grief that people are sharing. This loss of our innocence. Of it makes us feel like 9/11, but that happened and it ended. But this is, to look at the globe and see that this is affecting all of the globe feels differently, and to have that grief that's collective, I think is such a heavy thing. So I think that the frustrations are difficult for me to see, that people like me, even who do this every day, we don't have a plan for this. We don't have, we haven't thought of anything this big that would affect people on this scale, and naively have thought that other people were making plans. That there somehow is this emergency plan that we can help with instead of create ourselves. And so I think that frustration has been very difficult for me, to be trying to create something when I feel like there should be people that have already thought about this. So it is hard, and watching, overwhelmed with how many clergy people are in my Facebook feed. I've always known that, but to see that so vividly in services, and people just grasping at ways to be close to the people that they care about, and the people that they serve, and the community that needs them, but also that they need, to feel close to. So I think the emotional, and I think we'll be talking for years about the emotional and spiritual toll that this has taken. And maybe also talking about some wonderful gifts spiritually that it's brought us.
Yeah, that kind of was my next question, is that I think I was reading about this professor who focuses on joy, and particularly joy in times of suffering. And one of the things we've been trying to do in morning prayer since Friday at least, is not just talk about how we're doing or what the scriptures are saying to us at that moment, but also trying to acknowledge gratitude in our lives, and trying to find things that we're thankful for. And so I guess the question is, where do you find joy or see joy in the midst of this? And what are you grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for technology in ways that I never thought I would say. Incredibly grateful that I can see the faces of people that I care about, and watch how other people are living this out. There's great joy in watching how other people reach out to each other, even when you can't physically do that. Hearing Opera Memphis sing in my neighborhood, it was great joy. hearing the Snowden teacher parade come down the street and watching children come out and wave to their teachers from their cars. And, you know, our high school junior is doing school online now, but her teachers went around in their cars to, you know, just stop in front of the house and wave and say, we're still here, we still love you, we still care about you. And, you know, that's amazing and incredible that at a time where we could be really hunkered down, thinking only about what's going to happen to us, everybody's really looking for ways to do that.
I'm going to open it up now. Do other folks have questions? This is where you can unmute if you would like.
Not get in trouble.
This is Pat.
Hi, Pat.
I just want to say this is not a question, but an experience that I had on Ash Wednesday when we went to Catholic Charities to do a cookout in the freezing weather and the rain, but we did it. And all of a sudden I see this person waving at me. There's Pat. And I believe her name was Karen. She remembered me from Room in the Inn when we did it, when our church did it at Colonial. And I had such a great conversation with her, and that just made me see what we can do for these people and how much they really appreciate it.
You know, that's the difference. Some people ask a lot of times what the difference between Room in the Inn is, and along with other ways of doing this. There are ways to shelter people. There are ways to, you know, if I talk to a congregation who wants to put 50 people in their gym, and I was like, well, that's not Room in the Inn, because Room in the Inn is about community and about hospitality, and it's about what you're talking about caring, knowing your name, and that you're important to her, and in a way that you would never even understand, because you know who she is. That makes a difference. They go around all day feeling unseen. So people who see them, those are the gifts that they get in life.
And one of the things I love about, like, when you get, I think that this Room in the Inn experience that Pat's talking about highlights this to me. When you see someone out on the street and you're not in your neighborhood and they're not in their neighborhood, it makes the city feel like a small family. And there's like so much safety and comfort and peace and joy in that feels all warm and cozy. And I think that Room in the Inn is able to do that. That's pretty neat.
What's an average night like for a person who's there for shelter? Can you walk through
Sure.
from the time they get there till the time they leave?
Sure. We start downtown on 2nd Street at First Methodist Church there, and we have gone through a registration and orientation process with everybody that comes to seek shelter. And so it's not just a walk up and come in and go to a church. There's a process, and the guests know that, and they go through that. We make a covenant together. We both sign a covenant after the registration is complete that just says, this is what we promise to share with you. This is what you promise to covenant with us, just in the relationship, to have respect and appreciate each other. And then when they get there for the night, they sign in when they come in, and we have great volunteers who help us with the sign-in process, and it's a little complicated, but our system works well. They go on a list, and we prioritize women, and we haven't always done that through the years, but a few years ago we realized the incredible lack of shelter spaces for women in Memphis, and that we were one of the few places. that they could go. And so we prioritize women and they go on a list automatically. And then the number of people we can take is determined by the number of congregations that host that night. And that can be anywhere from 2 to 6. So it's a different number every night, which also complicates the process, but makes it exciting, I guess is a good word. And so everybody's names then goes on a congregation list. And, women go on those first, and then we do the men's list most of the time based on a drawing. Everybody has an equal opportunity to be in that drawing, and any leftover spaces go to men that are there on the list. And then we, unfortunately, almost every single night of the season, we turn away people who we don't have shelter space for because of the numbers. So those people who are turned away go on a priority list for the next night, so that at least they have a better chance the next night. And then the churches are responsible for transportation to and from that location. And they show up around 5:30 and pick up the guests and take them to the location where they're going to be hosting. And there's dinner provided. I didn't mention that the number of people that go are 12 to 15, and that number stays low for because we're a hospitality ministry, and it provides safety, and it's a good number for interacting, and it's a safe number. So 12 to 15 guests go to those locations. Dinner, place to wash up. Some places have showers. Some places have opportunity for getting clothes, and some don't. Some places have laundry, and some don't. So what's required for a congregation to be a room in the inn host is transportation, a place to sleep, and dinner, something to eat the next morning. So that's kind of a typical time. They go back downtown by 7 o'clock in the morning. A pretty significant percentage of the guests that we serve have jobs that they go to. Sometimes they're day labor jobs, or they have other jobs that they need to get to pretty early in the morning. So we ask that they return no later than 7 o'clock. That's pretty typical night.
I think Claire asked a question. She asked, is room in the inn still the only option for immediate emergency housing for full family units, meaning men can stay with the family and families are not waitlisted? This was true when we started. I hope it is no longer the case. Hardest nights are the nights we have children.
Yeah, I wish I could say that that's not true anymore, but it is true. We have had such significant numbers of women to shelter that we have not been able to shelter as many families this year. But one of our goals, 2 of our priority goals for the future, is to have space for respite for medically fragile people experiencing homelessness, people who are discharged from the hospital and need a place to recover. They're discharged back to the street. They don't have a home to go to, and so they're typically just discharged back to the street. We have people that come to us with IVs in their arm and have had, day surgeries that day, heart caths that morning, who just are gone back out of the street. So one of our goals is to have a permanent respite place for those kind of guests. And the other thing is to reach into that big gap for families. There's just not any places, and there are a lot of complications in that area. But there are some things happening right now with us to work with a couple of other agencies to really significantly impact the family shelter situation. But thanks for asking that, because it is a huge. Those are the 2 gaps. When we started Room in the Inn, one of the main things I kept saying was, we don't want to do something somebody else is doing. We want to fill gaps that are real gaps in the city. And those are 2 major ones that we've identified in the last few years.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? you can jump in here if you want, but I am going to ask. We've asked every one of our guests to do this, and that is, do you have a prayer or a blessing or a mantra or a chant or anything that you do either at either with your own practice or with Room in the Inn or Colonial that you would share with us, kind of as a blessing or a sending?
I love that this is the one that you didn't give me a heads up for.
Sorry.
Because I would have written a chant for this. I could have come up with one. I think when I close worship on Sunday mornings at Colonial, I always, in some form or fashion, say to them, go and be the feet of Christ in different places, and to express our love for people and each other in ways that that close some of that space between us. So I think that's it's kind of our charge and benediction almost every week in some way to see people, to really see people and to close that space gap between us. So I would have written a song if I'd known, but maybe.
Thank you so much for just sharing this time together, and just for being with us and being still and present in this space when I know it is a time where we're feeling like we need to be doing all the other things. So I appreciate your time.
I was looking forward to being, in huggable distance to Germantown people, but this is the next best thing. Yeah.
Yes, we're looking. I've been using the virtual hug emoji a lot.
Right.
Claire said, so Claire keeps messaging because she's having some breathing treatments and stuff, so she doesn't want to. But just want to thank you, Lisa, for your continued commitment to this vulnerable population. One of the hardest parts about moving for school was stepping back from this ministry because I worry about our friends. Thank you for always caring.
Well, thank you, Claire. We can't wait for you to be close enough again.
Yeah. Thank you all. Go in peace and stay well. Wash your hands and figure out who you can reach out to this week. Someone that you maybe haven't talked to in a long time, someone you sit next to at church, someone who you only have the email address or cell phone of. Reach out to them, see how they're doing, and try to close that virtual space in between us. Thank you guys. Have a good night.